on Monday. Our armchair QB discussion is brought to you by Bulldog Burger in Ridgeland. Amazing burgers and sandwiches and appetizers. And yes, they have Yuengling at Bulldog Burger in Ridgeland and Starkville and Oxford. 3 straight home games for Mississippi State. You can hit Bulldog Burger. You can hit Maroon & Co. And enjoy yourself this weekend. This weekend's game against Bowling Green is the Tito's Vodka Bloody Mary game. It's an 11 a.m. game, which gets you out, and you get to watch the Florida-Tennessee game, but that 6 o'clock game could be really, really good. A&M and Arkansas. Another game to keep an eye on, a future SEC team. Texas cannot go to Texas Tech and lose. They can't. Sark he'll get in a bad spot. And it could happen. It's a 5-point spread. It's not like Texas is a 17-point favorite. So those are a few games to look at. But A&M and Arkansas has a lot of sizzle. And Mississippi State plays both of those teams back-to-back at home after Bowling Green. And Ole Miss hasn't played either one of those teams yet either. So all eyes will be on that 6 o'clock game, A&M and Arkansas. The Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, is brought to you by Eye Care Professionals, Dr. Kirk Jeffries. Cataract surgery, Eye Care Professionals, Dr. Kirk Jeffries, 2 locations on Lakeland Drive, 1 in Jackson, Flowood, Belmead. Eye Care Professionals, Dr. Kirk Jeffries. We welcome in Steve Robertson, 247 Sports, Gene's Page, the Boneyard Podcast. Steve joins us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Steve, we debated earlier in the show all the drop passes by the MSU wide receivers. And they dropped passes against Arizona, and it didn't hurt them. They dropped passes against LSU, in which Will Rogers put it right on the money, and it did hurt them. They weren't able to get in rhythm, move the chains, and get some momentum. Is this a pattern? What's your takeaway from the drop passes the last 2 weeks, Steve?
Well, there's a lot more of them against LSU, and you're exactly right. They were timely. I think 3 of those drops came on 3rd down across the middle of the field, and that just can't happen. I mean, we talked about it last week, Bo. I mean, it's like, is this game a season record? No, it's not. But you'd like that game to have been more competitive, especially when State had a 2-score lead in the ball game and a chance to really take control. And then you have a little malaise there right at the end of the first half and allow LSU to get going because, Bo, you and I have both been to games with LSU for years, and that was a pretty subdued LSU crowd until that second half. And I think that's part of the issue. Schematically, I didn't think there was an issue. I thought execution-wise, State was not very good, and ultimately it cost them. And you can get away with that against Arizona, and you can get away with it against Memphis, but you can't have these periods of inactivity, especially at the wide receiver position, and expect to win on the road in the Southeastern Conference, and ultimately that cost Mississippi State the game.
So people are asking in year 3, why is that happening? I mean, yeah, you could argue that it's kind of been sloppy, a little bit lackadaisical all year for them. Even going back to Memphis, they're better than Memphis and Arizona. They don't look buttoned up, so to speak. And I think people that are still gung-ho Mike Leach and want Leach to work are asking the question, why is it a little sloppy and why is it buttoned up, Steve, in year 3 with a veteran laden team for the most part?
Yeah, and that's a very fair point. And one thing I will say too, they did not have many drops against Memphis, and they made a big deal about that, post game. But they didn't have any drops, and the fact that we have to point that out as a point of emphasis is a concern, right? I mean, like Jaden Wiley's arguably State's most explosive wide receiver, and he's led State in drops the last two seasons. But it was kind of position group wide. I mean, it was a big drop by Rufus there. I think the pass from Will may have been a little hot, but you got to make that catch, and Rufus will tell you he should have made that catch. And then Ra, of course, who might be your most talented receiver all the way around, he had a couple of big drops. And so that's got to get fixed. And it's like that's the basic tenet of football, right? I mean, especially when you play against a front like LSU. And I thought they did some things that were awfully creative, with their pass rush to kind of confuse Will at times and kind of force some early throws. But when you do get some protection and you do get an accurate pass, you got to make the catch. I mean, and that's from peewees to the pros. I mean, that's not just something that's indicative of Mississippi State. That's a basic tenet of football. And so that's got to get fixed. To be honest with you, if we're being brutally honest on a Monday, and if we can't do it on Monday, when can we do it? I thought the moment proved to be a little bit too big for Mississippi State. We talked about how the pressure was on LSU, but I think in some respects maybe we underscored, this was a chance for Mississippi State to take a step on a national stage on the road against a very talented LSU team. And this is not a great team yet. They may be a really good team by the end of the year, but LSU's never going to trot trash out there. I mean, right?
No.
You know this, Bo. I mean,
they
they're
have
a top 10
dudes.
recruiter.
Oh,
exactly.
Man.
And you have a chance. And I think that's the thing that Mississippi State fans feel today. It's like the first loss is always tough. It's always tough. But the reality of this is this was a chance for State to maybe take a step from, hey, it's going to be a good year to potentially be a great year, because you don't get that LSU team that is beatable in Tiger Stadium very often. And you had a chance and you didn't take full advantage.
Okay. Well, if I agree with you, the moment was too big for a veteran-laden team. So what did they do? I mean, what is it? Is it coaching? Is it off-season stuff? Is it practice? Is it not the right players? Because I thought the moment was too big last year in the Golden Egg game, going into halftime. They couldn't catch the ball, and they got rattled, and the moment was too big. This year, you're right. It's a talented LSU team, but they're not a good team. And the moment was too big. And the muff punt, by a senior, it's just one thing. So what's your takeaway on that? Like, what is the remedy? What is the solution for when it's a close A&M game, Arkansas game, I don't know, Auburn, Kentucky, and Ole Miss? These are all winnable games, but you can't make a bunch of mistakes, and the moment can't be too big. What's the solution, Steve?
Well, I don't think it is just one thing. I think number one, I think you play that game at home. I think that helps a little bit too. But some of it's recruiting. Some of it's recruiting. Some of it's development. And it's a little more complicated than just saying, hey, this is the one thing. I mean, you got to get some better players. And I think part of that, is involved with NIL, and there's a lot of that too. I think about with a lot of people that are complaining today have done nothing with NIL. They've not contributed to the Bulldog Initiative. They have not, set up monthly payments. They've not made contributions. They've just been to Walmart and bought a T-shirt and called themselves a Mississippi State fan and think, hey, take me seriously. And so, if you're one of those people that are like, hey, we need to make the next step, I think you got to do some self-evaluation and say, okay, well, what am I doing? I need Mike Leach to do this, and I need Ra Thomas to do this. Okay, well, what are you doing? What are you doing to make that job easier for everybody involved? And there is a collective responsibility here, and ultimately, it's Mike Leach getting paid $5.5 million a year, and so he's got to find the dudes, he's got to develop the dudes, and then when these moments come, they got to be prepared. And at the end of the day, it's like I read these things online sometimes, and of course, that and 50 cents will get you a cup of coffee at the Delo truck stop. But the reality of it is Mike Leach's got to get these guys ready to play, and Mike knows this. But the guys have to go out and execute. If Mike and us guys can design plays and get guys open on the road at LSU, you got to catch football. It's as simple as that. And Mike Leach can't go catch it for them, But Mike Leach has got to recruit the guys that are going to make those plays.
So when you look at the miscues, the missed PAT, the muff punt, the holding on a big return by Tulu, I guess it's kind of the same theme, that same road we're going down. At some point, will they clean it up?
Yeah, I think so. And I'll tell you this, it's like Xavier Thomas, I thought, was a real bright spot in the punt return game. And he had two returns across the 50 in LSU territory. You squandered the first one, you cash in on the second one. And, the game, I think, may have already been decided, but that holding call on that kick return, Tulu gets loose. And he didn't get loose because of the hold. That's the thing. That's so frustrating. Is that hold was so completely unnecessary, had no impact on the return whatsoever. You don't have to do that, and that's a veteran guy in Buki Watson. And so, and you go like the Austin Williams thing. I mean, it's like I'm not going to sit here and bash Austin Williams. The kid's giving everything he's got for Mississippi State. You got to field that punt or you got to get out of the way. The one thing you can't do is what happened there, is you can't muff that, because at that point, I wouldn't say State was in complete control, but State had control and a chance to put the game away. And then you go out there and you have a guy that is in the game because you trust him. They call him old reliable, Mr. Reliable, Austin Williams. Austin's got to make that play, and he'll tell you the same. And again, I'm not saying anything that you probably hadn't already discussed on the show, but that's the moment when the game got away from State. I think everybody that has ever attended a game at Tiger Stadium, when they went ahead 17-16, the game was already over. It was just a matter of what the final score was going to be.
Steve Robertson on the Yuengling Lager guest line. What did you make of what LSU did up front as they adjusted on defense to Will and that offensive line? Harold Perkins and those guys. Was that something that the Mississippi State offensive staff should have adjusted off of that? Because once they started doing some different things, it made that O-line and Will really uncomfortable.
Yeah, they did. And listen, you got to give those guys credit, too. It's not just on Mississippi State. I mean, some of the mistakes were a byproduct of LSU doing some great things defensively. And that front's legit. I think we all know that, outside of maybe Alabama, perhaps Georgia, you're not going to see a front that talented and athletic. And, Ojulari is a monster. I mean, right. I mean, you're not going to keep that guy quiet all night. It's like State got the benefit of kind of getting a scratch and dent Arden Key a couple of years ago. But, Ojulari is an absolute beast, and he didn't play last week. They wanted to get him healthy, but they overloaded the left side a lot, and sometimes they ran from that, and then the next time they would overload, and then when Will would counter, they wouldn't come. They'd come from somewhere else. And I thought they did a great job kind of, mixing and matching a little bit, and they disguised their coverages, and there were some times that it looked like it was going to be a good play to be made, and LSU's athleticism just took over. And I thought one of the best adjustments that Will made the entire night is they're over there overloading the left side. Dollar Bill recognizes it and kind of signals to Will, and then Will calls that halfback toss to Dylan Johnson. He breaks it for about 25 yards. And at that point, the chess game, I thought, favored Mississippi State. And then, again, you're there and you're competing, and then you have these self-inflicted wounds that basically make all of that kind of a moot point.
Well, it's a devastating loss because, as you said, you don't go down to Baton Rouge with that kind of opportunity often. And the next time you go down, Kelly will have, a couple of recruiting classes and transfer portal and so on. I would have to believe they'll be hitting on all cylinders. What would you like to see from, other than receivers not drop balls? Or maybe that is number one. What would you like for them to do this weekend getting ready for Texas A&M, Steve?
I think that is the most important thing. It's just catching football. It doesn't matter the quality of competition. You got to go out there and execute at a high level. And, I think State's got to take this game very seriously. And, of course, Bowling Green has not been a great team. They upset Marshall last week that recently beat Notre Dame. And so that's probably a good thing for Mississippi State. I don't think you're going to show up and go through the motions out there. And I think we're going to find out a lot about this team this week. And not that we don't expect State to win the game, but, if this team is who we think they are, then they should handle this game. I think the spread's, 32? State should win this game going away and really kind of show people, hey, last week was really awesome, and we didn't execute the way we should have. And you go out there and just execute with some consistency because, here's the thing, too, and but there's no getting around this. I don't care who you are, where you're from, or how talented you are. When you got to cross the face of the safety in the Southeastern Conference, especially on the road at a place like LSU that has 4- and 5-star kids, it shows you got some real toughness. And I thought that was lacking a little bit on Saturday. I think at times we heard footsteps and maybe perhaps we were afraid that we were going to get unloaded on. And that's one of the more disappointing things to me is that, this is a program through Leach and Spurrier Jr. and others that really, really, really advocates toughness. And I thought at times that the toughness was lacking on Saturday. And I think that was a key component in LSU's win. I think LSU in the second half was the tougher team, and it showed.
All right. Was there a player that you thought played really well that you were like, that's a guy that they needed to play well and he stepped up?
Well, I thought DeCambrion Richardson played well. And that's, I mean, look at the numbers. I mean, Malik Neighbors killed State on third down, but Antoine Boutte was not really a factor in the ball game, and he absolutely killed State last year. And they tried to get him paired up with some Bulldog safeties. I thought Jackie Matthews played real well, and there was a play early in that ball game where they run that bubble, and I'm surprised Jackie Matthews was able to get out of the city without picking up a criminal charge.
Yeah,
he absolutely destroys that perimeter blocker there, and that's the physicality we talked about last year. At State was losing. State did not have that dog in the secondary. I thought Jackie played well, but I thought in some very crucial situations, LSU found a way to get Malik Neighbors paired up on Colin Duncan or another safety, and they beat us. And that's the thing. You look at how many times did State have a chance to get off the field on those two big drives that allowed them to take control, and they went to Malik Neighbors. And I thought at times that they did a really good job with Jaden Daniels early, but I thought, listen, the defense played well enough to win. I know that fourth quarter looks bad in a box score, but you got to get more production from your offense. I thought the defense just simply gassed out. I mean, they played at such a high level, for 2.5, 3 quarters, and then they're short into the field and they can't come through. And you just kind of feel like in many respects in the second half, the offense kind of let the defense down.
All right. We'll wrap it up with this. Did they take advantage of the 2 freshman tackles from LSU enough? State's
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I thought they got good pressure. I mean, it's just it's kind of like we talked about. Jaden Daniels basically ran to script what you and I talked about last week. The guy doesn't see the field exceptionally well, and he does like his first read in there. He panics a little bit, but he's athletic enough to tuck it and go. And I don't know if State's going to see a quarterback as athletic as him the rest of the year. And then that's no disrespect to anybody else. It's just, that kid's a plus runner all the way. And that's kind of what happened, in the second half of that ball game is he's like, you know what? Hey, I can't figure out this puzzle for coverage. So I'm just going to tuck it and go. And then I thought they did a really good job simplifying things and giving him some 1 and 2 receiver routes to kind of limit the decision-making process. But I felt like State could have done a little bit more, maybe rushing off the edge, or a lot of times we ran pressure up the middle and then he would just sidestep it and run to the sidelines. And so give the kid a lot of credit. I just don't know how long he's going to be able to survive in the SEC running as much as he does, because the physical toll that'll come as a result of that is something that I think LSU folks got to be aware of that.
All right. We'll leave it there. Steve Robertson, 247 Sports, Gene's Page, the Boneyard Podcast. Disappointing performance from Mississippi State. They got 3 in a row at home. Bowling Green, A&M, Arkansas, all winnable games. I think do you agree, Steve, this is going to decide what kind of season they have?
Absolutely. And I think at worst you got to win 2 of those 3, but you need to win all 3. I think we all agree that probably the defining stretch is this A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky. You got to get 2 of those 3. You absolutely have to get 2 of those 3. If you can get all 3, all of a sudden you kind of erase a little bit of the sting of Saturday. But we've said all along it's probably an 8-4 team, and so we'll kind of see how things progress. But you could take a step forward by getting hot here and winning these next 3.
Yeah, I don't see 8-4, 7-5 maybe if they can win. Let's see, they win the next 3, and then that's a tall task. But if they win the next 3, that's 5. Yeah, there's
5.
some other winnable games. I see at Kentucky, maybe Auburn at home, and East Tennessee. I give Ole Miss the advantage right now. Georgia and Alabama's out, so boy, it's huge. 3 weeks. All right, Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. So Blake, Bowling Green beat Marshall last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean anything to me.
even though Marshall beat Notre Dame the week before.
Okay, what's that
So
mean?
everybody patted them on the back and they no-showed.
And also Notre Dame's terrible.
Man, that Notre Dame Cal, I watched a little bit of that. I went over there just to see if Freeman was going to get upset again.
And he almost did.
And Cal Berkeley's awful. Georgia Tech, we were talking about, Georgia Tech's, these are more academically driven programs lots of similar, right? I mean, Cal Berkeley, Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt. There's not much difference in those teams, and Notre Dame did almost lose
At home
against a Cal Berkeley team that is bad. So
it's another example of poor offense despite talent.
Yeah.
How much that's what's crazy to me is that in the era, in the year 2022, that there are that many top 25, top 30 talent rosters running offenses that remind me of what I saw in 3A Louisiana high school football. It really is remarkable.
Notre Dame,
A&M's terrible.
Auburn,
LSU's offense awful. Auburn's offense
LSU's
awful.
those are not. I mean, the way they're run.
Look, you can go back and even look at Florida. Even in the win at Utah, you start looking at things, and then you look at what they've done the last 2 weeks. Awful offensively.
I know.
And we're talking about top 30
Miami
talented rosters.
Good. Oh, some of these top 10, top 5, top 15, Miami, they're not any good on. Their offense is not any good. It's unreal. But a Hugh Freeze or a Lane Kiffin at Miami could make them look better.
I wonder if
Hugh Freeze at Notre Dame, Lane Kiffin at Notre Dame, they may not be an offensive juggernaut. I'm not saying they're, whoever. I guess who isn't? Georgia and Ohio State, but is that just because of talent?
Yeah. I think of
maybe Tennessee looks to be really revving up, and Heupel's doing a good job with Hendon Hooker and the pieces that they have. Obviously, Kiffin's doing a good job with Evans and Trigg and Judkins.
The last decade, Ole Miss is a great example of a team that was always more offensive than their talent profile.
Yeah.
Right? Like their offense always outperformed what their total team performed.
Even though they had some amazing players.
Yeah. Because it was all offensive centric. And that's, I think, like their team might be 8-4, but their offense felt like it was a 10-2 offense, right? Like that is like, where is that for better teams?
For Notre Dame, for Auburn, for LSU, for A&M, and for Miami. And there's another one. We'll see what Texas does this. I know they lost their QB, but you're Texas. And they go to Texas Tech this weekend.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I mean, Penn State's they're not really.
Clemson doesn't even look
dynamic.
Very good offensively.
Clemson has Wake Forest, and I know Wake shouldn't be what they are, but that line is somewhat tight.
Wake Forest owned Vanderbilt in Nashville 2 weeks ago. Don't sleep on the Demons.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Out of Bounds show, brought to you by Cypress Depot in Ridgeland. CypressDepot.com. That's CypressDepot.com. Also, shout out to Jake Manning and MS Smart Homes. MSSmartHomes.com will drive your entertainment system, and they'll make it right. Check them out right now, MSSmartHomes.com. And don't forget that USA Pawn has an awesome selection of smart TVs. We'll be back tomorrow.